What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. While we might focus primarily on the Pokémon in our journey, almost just as prominent are all of the trainers that we will be facing along the way. And just like the creatures, these people come in all shapes and sizes and favor certain types over others. Maybe you're a Ruin Maniac who likes to use the ground types, or maybe you're just a generic lass or youngster that will use all sorts of different Pokémon. But as with anything, there are trainer classes that you love to see and always have a good time fighting, and there are ones that you dread and try to avoid at all costs. So while it is fairly subjective and what makes a good trainer or bad trainer can change, let's list what I believe to be the best and worst trainer classes from each generation of Pokémon. Gen 1 worst, the Juggler. So I almost went with Fisherman here because it's so annoying when you inevitably find the one Fisherman trainer in every region that has 6 Magikarp, wasting your time with next to no reward. But ultimately, I've got to give it to the Juggler. At first glance, it seems innocuous, but the truth is, there's no reason to have this class. Firstly, this class has never been outside of a game with Kanto, and in Gen 1, the Jugglers exclusively used Psychic-type Pokémon. If you're going to have a Psychic-type user that suspends their Pokéballs in the air, the Psychic Trainer class is a much better option. Not to mention, there was that one that seems to be working with Team Rocket and Silphco. It's strange how Pokémon seem to portray their entire world as some sort of circus in the early generations, with Tamers and Fire Breather classes as well, but at least in Gen 2 the Jugglers did switch to having the Voltorb line, so they finally realized their own theme. But speaking of, their gimmick was supposed to be switching Pokémon, which would actually be pretty cool, especially since NPCs rarely do so, but in practice they never do it enough to really notice. So I guess I can see why this lackluster class has had trouble nailing down an identity over time. Gen 1 best, the Cool Trainer. Obviously, Gen 1 created many Pokémon trainer classes that would go on to appear in plenty of generations to come, if not all of them, so there are plenty of choices for an iconic group to provide a good time. But for my money, the best title would have to go to the Cool Trainer. Yeah, they're not really called that anymore, now they just go by Ace Trainers. There's so many reasons why these trainers are some of the best. Firstly, they always have some of the nicest threads in any region. But the more important aspect is their Pokémon teams and the fact that they can use almost anything. They have no type restrictions on them, being some of the hardest trainers to face because you'll never know exactly what they have with any possible combination of coverage you can imagine. And crucially, they are some of the only trainers to occasionally have other starter Pokémon, so you can actually see what the other options were that you or your rival didn't pick, and at least have a half-completed dex. Not only are these trainers on the upper end of Pokémon battling experiences, but their variety is an unparalleled gift, meaning that they are indeed ace and cool. Gen 2 worst, the Medium. Johto actually added a fair amount of classes when it didn't have to, so that did kind of help make its mark. But even if some of those were weirdly restrictive, the overall worst has got to be the Medium. This is the generally Ghost-type specialist, even if it does use some Psychic Pokémon too. My problem with this class is once again its irrelevancy. See, we already had the Channelers from Generation 1, and frankly I don't see a good reason why they had to make specific changes and make them Mediums instead. I think the strange woman wailing creepy things at the player in the Ghost Tower from last time would work just as well in the Ghost-type gym. Because the gyms are the only place that this trainer is even found in the game, so I don't see why we needed them at all, especially when they got immediately replaced by another Ghost Girl class, this one being much more prominent and beloved by the fans for various reasons, but long story short, the Medium was not necessary in Johto. Gen 2 best, the Pokefan. One aspect of the Pokemon world that we rarely get to see is the simple interactions that people have outside of battle. We see it more somewhat these days, but that's why I appreciate the Pokefans so much. Obviously they do fight us since they are a trainer class, but it's something different. These people clearly love Pokemon as much as we do, and can you blame them? Wouldn't you be even more excited about Pokémon if you could actually go out and capture one? They're always so wholesome, being decked out in Pokémon memorabilia, or even playing with their kids dressed up as Pokémon. These kids probably grow up to be Pokémaniacs, but still. And what's truly impressive is the Gen 2 sprite of the male Pokéfan is wearing a Mimikyu shirt, so they are clearly the devoted superfans that you love to see. I bet they're even subscribed. Have you subscribed? Pokéfans are the best. Gen 3 worst, the Bug Maniac. Gen 3 brought in a lot more classes, even starting to make some unique combinations, but the worst to me has got to be the Bug Maniac. I don't know if it was solely for the naming convention for more maniacs, but there is no difference from the normal bug catcher. It would be one thing if the bug catchers were like a Game Boy exclusive, but no, they're here in the Hoenn region too. I'm not sure why they had to make an older and creepier version of a class that they already were using prominently. The main difference in theory is that the Bug Maniacs would have stronger and further evolved Pokémon, but that kind of goes out the window when you see them use a Surskit and a tiny bug catcher use a Ninjask. So I don't know what's going on here, and neither do they. Gen 3 best, the Pokémon Ranger. When you think of Pokémon Rangers, we generally tie it to Gen 4, but they were first introduced here in Gen 3, and that does make sense because even though the original Ranger game was on the DS, it did come out before Diamond and Pearl. It's hard to detach this trainer class from the larger impact that it's had on the Pokémon series, spawning a whole genre of spin-off games, as well as several prominent arcs in the anime. But even if their outward presence has diminished somewhat, they still pop up in the mainline games generations later. In Gen 3, they did seem to prioritize the grass type, but after that they branch out to all types like Ace Trainers. And I always loved fighting them in Gen 5 because they would give you a berry after you defeated them. Because, after all, it's still their job to help people, right? It's just such a cool window into a bit of Pokémon lore that is vastly different from our own world, and all tied up in a neat bow with a stylish and fun trainer class to encounter. Gen 4 worst, the Jogger. Honestly, I didn't even remember this one, and I just played through Brilliant Diamond. But apparently it's a real thing. It is the worst for multiple reasons. First of all, it is a worse version of last gen's model. Hoenn had the Tri-Athlete, which was actually 3 different kinds of trainer classes in one, with a running, swimming, and biking option that you would find in their appropriate locations. That was really cool, so why split it up? It doesn't make sense when they still had cyclists and swimmers in this game. Furthermore, the reason I probably don't remember this particular trainer class is because they can only be encountered in the morning time. That is only from 4 AM to 10. So, unless you play a real quick 20 minutes before you leave for school, any person on a reasonable schedule will likely never run across this brisk walker in that brief window, meaning that it might as well not even be a trainer class at all. Gen 4 best, the Veteran. By contrast, the Veteran was a welcome addition to the roster. Its initial look might make you think they focus on fighting types, but not so, because they use a smattering of any type they feel like. It's fleshed out in the later generations when they make unique female models as well, but this class is essentially what the Ace Trainers will age into. They're the older Pokemon trainers who have been in the game for a long time, and have some of the strongest Pokemon around for random NPCs. They're essentially those of us who are older and have been playing Pokemon for years, so we're pretty good at it. It's cool to have that as a possibility in the game. And, you know, the fact that nobody makes fun of those full-grown adults for liking Pokemon. Gen 5 worst, the Sports. There are some weird options from Unova, like having a Harlequin when there's already a Clown class, but for my money, I've got to give the worst to all of the many sports-based trainers. Now, this isn't inherently bad. I do think that it would be kind of boring to have regular human football when you've got a perfectly good Passimian just begging for work. But the main issue here is that, of the new trainer classes in Black and White, these sports-related ones make up 23%. They are only found sometimes in one city in the game, and literally none of them have ever been seen again. You couldn't even squeeze one of them out for Galar in their giant stadiums? It's just ridiculous when they placed so much emphasis on this in Gen 5, but it's never been included before or since, so it just ends up bloating the roster far too much. Gen 5 Best, the Dancer. As far as in-game usefulness of trainers, the Unova introduction of the Doctor class is phenomenal, being able to heal your Pokémon out in the field. However, for overall impact, I'm going to say the Dancer class. I picked this one not only because it is another class that is not tied to any particular type, rather using a variety of Pokémon, but it is one of the best options that we've seen for conveying the differences of culture between regions. In Unova, we got to reunite a troupe of breakdancers in the big city, while in Alola, we get to engage with a hula dancer who sends out an Oricorio. They could still use some more specifically dance-related Pokémon, but the potential that this trainer class presents is relatively untapped. I mean, just imagine the brilliant dancers that they could give us in Scarlet and Violet. So as of now, they've already provided some solid showings, but I look forward to seeing more of what the Dancer class can produce in the future. Gen 6 Worst, the Nobility. Like Gen 5, this is another sweeping generalization, but really it's too much. I will admit that I spent much of my time in Kalos in the Battle Chateau, so I appreciate the whole endeavor, but did we really need to create so many new classes just for this? Earl, Duke, Duchess, Baron, Baroness, Viscount, Viscountess, and a bunch more French words. And the worst part is they're not even unique because they just steal the models from all of the other trainer classes. People complain about certain Pokemon being nothing but dex filler, but what about trainer classes? When you bring in double digits of names that add no real value or even unique character models, it just seems like you're trying really hard to impress everyone, but it really just reveals how inept you are. Gen 6 Best, the Tourist. It was tempting to place the Professor class in this spot, since we finally got to battle our Pokemon Professor after all these years, harkening back to the cut content from fighting Oak all the way back in Gen 1. But ultimately, I'm going to give it to the Tourist. As Dancers gave us a window into the current region, the Tourist have the ability to provide us a glimpse into other regions, be it ones that we have visited in years past, or ones that have yet to come out. This is borrowed by the similarly inspired classes of the Honeymooners and the Sightseers, and while their attire might not give us many clues about things to come, they can often drop secrets and dialogue that we don't even realize at the time. So since they will likely keep those little hints of future regions, it would only make sense to keep bringing back tourists from those locations, or at the very least from some of the places in the past that we love. Gen 7 Worst, the Youth Athlete. So now we find a trainer class that draws from multiple previous worst entries. These are just the Alola variants of the Lass and Youngster classes with sports equipment copy-pasted on. That's right, the only other sports-related trainers have nothing to do with the overload of options that Unova gave us, while at the same time stealing the models of other classes just like the Kalos mistakes. And the thing is, it's not like it would have been out of place for a little kid to be holding sports equipment anyway. So this could have been the default model for, say, the Youngster class, for example, and just have the boy holding the bat as is. It's just exhausting to deal with so many baffling decisions. Gen 7 Best, the Surfer. How did it take until halfway through Generation 7 before we even got a Surfer in Pokémon? Nobody thought of this? We've had swimmers and water-specific routes from the very beginning. I guess I could see them wanting to save it for a Hawaii-based region, but it wasn't until the Ultra games, so it seems like it kinda snuck up on them. But aside from the aesthetics, this class is not nearly as limited as you might expect, since they are not shackled purely to the water type. We've seen them use a Delibird before, and even a Sandygast. That does work, being by the beach, but the fact that they have something opposite of the water type is just exciting so they don't get pigeonholed into one thing. And I do think that it would be more likely for them to show up again in Gen 9 than say it would have for Galar. But speaking of, Gen 8 Worst, the Macrocosmos. So Gen 8 actually has the least amount of new trainer classes introduced in their debut games to date, and a good chunk of them were related to the Gym Challenge and that sort of thing. I'll be honest, this one is mostly here because I'm still fuzzy on the connections this Macrocosmos company has to the main plot. I've played through the main story twice now, and as best as I can tell, They don't distinguish anything about them until near the end just to get in your way, even though both in story and execution they are literally the same thing as the League staffers that you encounter. So to me, this just seems like a huge waste when this, I guess, is what you would call the main evil team, technically? It's all just a big mess, so I think we would have been better off without it. Gen 8 Best, the Bandit. I was sorely tempted to go with the model trainer class, largely because I was confused as to how we didn't have them before with actual models, and I do look forward to furthering that one in the future as well, but instead I'm going to go with what might be an oddball pick in the Bandit class. This category wasn't introduced until Legends Arceus, and there were only 3 of them, but at least this time the limited number is valid due to story reasons. And as cool as it is to see potential character relations, I don't think that's the extent of what this class can offer us. Generation 1 gave us the Burglar class, but they really functioned more akin to looters, so I think it would be a neat idea for the bandits to play a larger role in a more traditional Pokemon game. They could operate as an additional antagonist to whatever evil team there is, so that you have to watch out for more than one party on your journey. And if Pokemon is going to transition to more of an open world setup, wouldn't bandits be a great option for random events when they ambush you out in the wild? If they don't bother doing anything with this class in the future, I may have to revisit the idea. But for now, the bandit class by far has the most potential from any of the very few they added in Generation 8. So, those are the best and worst trainer classes from each generation of Pokemon. Which trainer classes do you find the most influential? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!